My wife wouldn't stop texting her coworker on our honeymoon. She leaves me sitting at the table with her phone, then a notification pops up. It's from one of her male coworkers. So this morning at breakfast, my wife leaves me sitting at the table with her phone. She says her mom is about to call any second and she doesn't want to miss it. So she asks me to keep an eye on the phone while she goes to grab some stuff from the breakfast buffet. Totally normal, nothing weird about it. I'm half awake, sipping coffee, just scrolling the room and waiting for our food. While I'm holding her phone, a push notification pops up. It's from one of her male coworkers. The message preview says something along the lines of her looking beautiful on our wedding day with a heart emoji. Then there's a long paragraph underneath about how much he's enjoyed watching the lead up to our wedding and how much she means to him as a coworker. That alone made my stomach tighten a bit. Not full panic, but definitely that uncomfortable drop where your brain goes, okay, that feels a little off. I'm standing there holding my wife's phone on our honeymoon, and some guy is sending her heart emojis and compliments about her wedding day. I hesitate for a moment. I genuinely do. I know snooping is a line, and I'm not proud of crossing it. But curiosity gets the better of me, and I tap the notification, which opens the message thread. What I see next is what really messes with my head. For the past week, basically since we've been on our honeymoon, my wife has been texting this guy multiple times a day. Not just a quick check-in here or there. Constant messages. Updates about the honeymoon. Photos of meals almost every day. One photo of her in the pool. I scroll a little, my heart starting to beat faster, trying to make sense of what I'm looking at. Nothing in the snippets I see is explicitly sexual or outright inappropriate. No flirting that crosses an obvious line, but the communication itself is nonstop, and that alone feels intimate. Some of the messages drift into emotional territory. She's talking about how she's feeling after the wedding, her future plans, her anxiety about starting studying again. Things that feel personal, vulnerable, the kind of conversations I assumed we'd be having with each other, especially right now. What really stands out to me is that none of it mentions us as a couple. She doesn't talk about we or my husband or even say my name. It's all just her feelings, her thoughts, her experiences shared with him. At one point, it even feels like she's fishing for excuses to keep the conversation going. There's a message where she says something like, "This person at our hotel looks exactly like Pete from work, haha," which just feels unnecessary. Like she wanted a reason to reach out again when he hadn't replied yet. The more I scroll, the more confused I get. Not angry, not yet, just unsettled. What makes it worse is realizing who isn't hearing from her. She hasn't texted any of her close female friends. She hasn't messaged relatives. She hasn't posted any holiday pictures publicly. All these photos, our meals, parts of our trip, are only being sent to this guy. As far as I can tell, the only people she's communicated with since we arrived are him and her mom and dad via calls. I start comparing it to my own behavior without even meaning to. I've called my mom, my dad, my grandma. I texted my best friend once just to let him know we got here safely and that I'd tell him all about the trip when we got back. That was it. I've been deliberately trying to unplug, to focus on us for these couple of weeks, because that's what this trip is supposed to be about. Sitting there with her phone in my hand, I also start replaying little things from before the wedding that I hadn't thought much about at the time. She'd mentioned this coworker more frequently in the weeks leading up to it. Nothing dramatic, just small comments slipped into conversations. G has pants like that. G says you shouldn't chop the vegetables that way. Little references that didn't mean much individually, but now feel louder in hindsight. What's confusing is that my wife isn't miserable at her job. It's not like she's clinging to a work friend for survival. This guy is relatively new at her workplace, and she's had coworkers there she's known for 5+ years, people she's genuinely close with. Yet this is the person she's chosen to stay constantly connected to, on our honeymoon of all times. By the time she comes back from the buffet, my head is spinning. I lock the phone and hand it back to her like nothing's wrong. Breakfast continues, and on the outside I'm calm, but inside I'm debating with myself. Am I overthinking this? Am I being insecure? Or is this something I shouldn't ignore? I don't want to be that jealous, controlling guy. But I also don't want to sit silently and let resentment build while pretending everything is fine. A little while later, once we're alone, I decide to say something, keep my voice calm. I tell her that I'd really appreciate it if she could limit contact with that coworker for the duration of our trip. I explain that I just want us to focus on each other and that the frequency of contact makes me feel uncomfortable. She gets defensive at first, not explosive, but clearly caught off guard. There's some tension in the air, and for a moment I wonder if I've completely misread the situation. Eventually, though, she apologizes, which honestly surprises me, because I don't even feel like an apology was necessary. She agrees to only communicate anything necessary about work with any coworker for the rest of the trip. I mention, almost offhand, that for comparison, my Teams and email are set to away, do not even attempt to contact me unless it's life or death. And I genuinely love my team. I just wanted this time to be about us. That conversation was about 4 hours ago. Things seem okay now. She's affectionate. She's happy. Everything feels normal on the surface. But I can't shake this nagging feeling in my chest. Now I'm stuck wondering if I screwed up by setting that boundary. Did I overreact? Am I being overbearing or overly jealous? Or was it better to say something early, before whatever this was had a chance to grow into something worse? I've read enough stories about emotional affairs to recognize how they sometimes start, and part of me worries that's the direction this was heading in. But another part of me is scared that I projected my own fears onto an innocent situation and created an issue where there didn't need to be one. I keep replaying everything in my head, trying to decide if I did the right thing, or if I just planted a seed of doubt that didn't need to exist. Since that conversation, I've been trying really hard to stay present. We went for a walk, grabbed drinks, talked about random things, laughed. On the surface, everything feels exactly the same as it did before. She's been affectionate, holding my hand, leaning into me, kissing me like nothing's wrong. If I didn't know what I knew, I'd probably think this honeymoon was going perfectly. But internally, I'm not fully relaxed anymore. There's this low-level hum in my chest, like my brain refuses to fully shut off. I keep thinking back to that message thread, replaying it in my head, wondering if I imagine the significance of it or if my instincts are picking up on something real. I don't want to punish her in my mind for something she hasn't actually done, but I also can't unsee what I saw. What messes with me the most is the timing. If this were a normal work week back home, maybe I wouldn't feel so unsettled. But we're on our honeymoon. This is supposed to be our bubble, our little break from the outside world. And yet, emotionally, it felt like someone else was present in that space with us, even if only through a phone screen. I also keep circling back to how deliberate the communication seemed. It wasn't just reactive replies. She was initiating conversations, sending photos, sharing thoughts, choosing him as the person to update throughout the day. That choice is what sticks with me. At the same time, I feel guilty for even thinking this way. She hasn't hidden her phone. She didn't lie when I brought it up. She agreed to the boundary, and now she's acting completely normal, happy, even. Which makes me wonder if this really is all in my head. Part of me worries I set a precedent I didn't mean to. I don't want to be someone who dictates who my partner can or can't talk to. That's not who I am, and it's not the kind of marriage I want. I don't believe in control, and I don't want her to feel monitored or restricted. But another part of me feels like asking for emotional space during our honeymoon isn't unreasonable. Like it's okay to say, hey, this makes me uncomfortable, especially this early into our marriage. Especially when we're still figuring out what boundaries look like for us as a couple. I keep asking myself if I should have handled it differently. Should I have waited until after the trip? Should I have said nothing and trusted her completely? Or would that have just meant swallowing my feelings and letting resentment quietly build until it exploded later? I also can't ignore the fact that until I said something, she hadn't mentioned this coworker once during the trip. Not in passing. Not casually. Which is strange considering how much she was communicating with him behind the scenes. It makes me wonder if she even realized how one-sided her attention had become, or if she genuinely didn't see anything odd about it at all. Right now, everything is calm, maybe too calm. And I don't know if that's because the issue is resolved or because it's just been temporarily pushed aside. So I'm sitting with this uncomfortable mix of emotions. Relief that I spoke up, guilt that I might have overstepped, and uncertainty about whether I did the right thing. I love my wife. I trust her, but I'm also trying to trust myself and my feelings, and that balance feels harder than I expected it to be. I guess what I'm really asking is this: did I act like a reasonable partner who communicated a boundary early, or did I let insecurity creep in and turn a non-issue into something bigger than it needed to be? Because right now, I genuinely can't tell. All right, so this one is complicated, and honestly, pretty relatable. On one hand, nothing here crosses a clear, undeniable line. There's no explicit flirting, no secret meetups, no obvious betrayal. The wife wasn't hiding her phone, she didn't lie when confronted, and she agreed to set boundaries when her husband explained how he felt. Those things matter, especially this early in a marriage. But on the other hand, context matters just as much as content. This wasn't a random workday. This was their honeymoon. And during that time, she chose one specific male coworker as the primary person to share updates, photos, and emotional thoughts with, while barely communicating with friends or family and not really framing her experience as something shared with her husband. That's where the discomfort comes from. Emotional affairs don't usually start with cheating. They start with attention, priority, and emotional intimacy, slowly shifting outside the relationship. Constant messaging, sharing personal fears, seeking validation, and maintaining contact even when there's no real reason. That's often how the line starts to blur. What the husband did here wasn't an accusation. He didn't demand access to her phone or tell her she couldn't have friends. He expressed discomfort and asked for space during a very specific, very meaningful time in their relationship. That's not controlling. That's communication. Could this have been innocent? Absolutely. Some people don't recognize when work friendships drift into emotional territory, but addressing it early, calmly, and respectfully is far healthier than staying silent and letting resentment build. If anything, this situation highlights how important it is for couples to define boundaries together, especially around emotional intimacy with others, because what feels harmless to one partner can feel deeply unsettling to the other. So no, he's not being a psycho. He noticed something felt off, trusted his instincts, and spoke up without blowing things up. That's what adults in a marriage are supposed to do. The real test now is whether those boundaries hold and whether both partners continue to prioritize each other moving forward.